trying to, well, I'm trying to find a way to utilize pictures. The old package wood plant is over there, and that waste has been on there forever. And even though they fenced off alligators before they developed, they've never fenced off the picture. And you still have children, you still have population, and we don't know what's in the soil. So without testing the soil, and then using it, they upside it. Before they can take the soil out. And then all of a sudden you have the health service and Department of Health and all these people move, but there's no mention of how did they move the soil. They moved the dam. Moved their dam, then you had mills. Because I asked the question, what was the reason for this? They never figured it out. Because there's several other dams. There's a reason for all this stuff, and then they're moving. Don't look at the issue. Yeah, I'm into it. But I'll take you something. How many people would like to plumbing, especially they could have their own cars. But I do.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission to order for Monday, September 16, 2019. Roll call.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Cooney.
Present.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Here.
Commissioner Griffin.
Here.
Commissioner Urban.
Here.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Here.
Mayor Hopewell.
Present. For our opening ceremony this evening, we will have an invocation by Pastor Seth Wildryer of the First Presbyterian Church. Having trouble talking. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Holy One of love and giver of all life, we lift to you this night all of our servants here around this table, and we pray for all of those who serve and lead in our city. Give them wisdom and compassion and strength to nurture our needs and our joys and those of everyone we live with. We lift to you our children for good schools and caring teachers and healthy homes, for clothing and food and shelter enough that they can thrive and grow. We lift to you all citizens in our places of work and home, in our causes and concerns, among our friends and neighbors and colleagues and strangers, that we may foster a welcoming and thriving place to live together. We lift to you our public safety officers. Keep them safe and centered in your wholeness. We lift to you all people who are in a special need this night, who are hurting and who worry, who are sick, who are in need of a friend, people who are refugees and need a home or a sanctuary to go. God, be in our eyes and our hearing. God, be in our hearts and our thinking, our mouths and our acting. And in your holy names we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one proclamation this evening for Kalamazoo Recycling Challenge. I'm not sure who's receiving.
I'm not aware of a specific person. Not that I'm aware of.
We have the proclamation, and good enough. Item C, the adoption of the formal agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on items under the consent agenda, that item will need to be moved to the regular agenda. The consent agenda is items under F. If you have such an item, please indicate at this time. Just tell us from there what item you want moved on the consent agenda.
Possibly number 8, unless I can cover that by speaking before E.
We'll move number 8 to the regular agenda. Are there any other items? Okay. I will comment on the recycling challenge for a minute. We had a press conference with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and I forget the new other letter, but it's called EAGLE now, which is a challenge, know what you throw, and it's regarding challenge to get us to increase the recycling within our community. We're about 2,100 tons of recycling. You'll know that a number of you on this body were here when we moved to mixed recycling, where you could put your paper and plastic and everything all together. That is great and wonderful, but not everyone knows what should or should not go in the recycling and what you have to clean out and all of those things. So we're going to be challenging our community to hopefully get us to 2,500 tons of recycling, and there's a new program that will be helping us do that. You're going to see it around the state. There's a bunch of raccoons involved, and as the mascots for this program. As you know, raccoons love to get into trash, love to get into stuff, so that's the symbol that we're using in the state. And we had a wonderful presser today. I got to get hugged by a raccoon, which is pretty cool. But it was a good day. But an opportunity for us to improve where we're at and continue to look at how we can work to protect our environment. We are now on communications. Manager Ritson.
None, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Item E1, I will now open a public hearing to receive comments on an ordinance rezoning 700 South Howard Street from Zone CN-1 to Zone RM-36. CN is what again, folks? Commercial neighborhood, and RM is multifamily. Could we make sure that they're spelled out, please, so that we're telling folks what these mean? Thank you. Anyone wanting to comment at this public hearing, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Anderson.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Cooney. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Yes or no? I'll now move to item E2. I'm going to read it in the record. Before I open the public hearing, we're going to have some comments from the city attorney, but E2 is a public hearing to receive comments on an ordinance to amend section 4.2 of the zoning code regarding medical marijuana facilities standards. Mr. Attorney, you have a report?
Very briefly, Your Honor and Commissioners, both this one and the following ordinance are changes that are being made into our existing marijuana zoning ordinances to account for changes that occurred in state law, case law, and regulatory rules, so that our ordinances are compliant with existing state standards. The real big change was two things. First off, the state said that you have to permit outdoor grow operations. We did not permit that, but the state in their rules said you have to permit outdoor grow operations. We've made that change. The other is that we were handling medical marijuana before the commercialization of it as purely as a home occupation. And there was a case that was decided on in the east side of the state that said municipalities may not limit it to home occupations. You've got to permit it in other venues. And we've now said you can put it in a commercial zone. So those are the changes we've been making, and they both this ordinance and the following one again are to bring us in compliance with existing state regulations and law. Thank you.
Any questions for the attorney? Sorry, any questions for the attorney? Again, I'll now open a public hearing to receive comments on an ordinance to amend sections 4.2 of the zoning code regarding medical marijuana facilities standards. Anyone wanting to comment on this item, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening.
Good evening. Jevin Weinberg, Portage, Michigan. First, I just want to say thank you for your continued time and attention, especially the city attorney's office. I can't imagine how many man hours have been spent on this subject over the years, but thank you for continuing to look at it, continuing to try to make it better in your mind, and keep us moving forward. But I'm here to specifically talk about opting out and what that might mean for businesses on the ground, specifically the grows and processors that are licensed in this city.
Sir, you should really make those comments when it comes to the regular agenda. With that item,
Okay.
we'll move it there and you'll have opportunity to make those comments.
All right, fair enough, thank you.
Anyone wanting to comment on this item, E2? Seeing no others, Commissioners requested action is a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Cooney,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Cunningham. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Item E3, I'll now open a public hearing to receive comments on an ordinance to amend section 4.3 of the zoning code regarding medical marijuana as a home occupation. Anyone wanting to speak at this public hearing, please step to the podium. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners requested actions, a motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion?
So move.
Moved by
Support.
Commissioner Anderson, supported by Commissioner Cunningham. Discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. The consent agenda, please.
We have the following presented here for approval this evening. First is the approval of a 4-year contract with Soils and Materials Engineers for materials testing services in the amount of $103,550. Next is the approval of a one-year contract with Ferguson Waterworks for the purchase of miscellaneous water inventory in the amount of $170,840.88. Next is the approval of a one-year contract with Aetna Supply Company for the purchase of miscellaneous water inventory in the amount of $310,848.70. Next is the approval of a contract with Access Interactive through the Oakland County Cooperative G2G program, contract number 004561 for the data center consolidation and refresh project in the amount of $199,302.39. Next is the approval of a contract and implementation with Human Resources Information System, HRIS, Kronos Workforce Readiness, who is a pre-qualified firm for human resources and payroll for a total of $460,984.80 over a 3-year period. Next is the approval of a contract with Michigan Department of Transportation for the Cork Street Improvement Project in the amount of $6,547,400. Next is the approval of a lease agreement with DLL Finance LLC partner for the golf carts from 2019 to 2023 in the amount of $477,350.08. Next is the adoption of resolutions number 1, 2, and 3 for the purpose of approving the 2018 Kalamazoo Mall sidewalk maintenance assessment at a per square or per front foot cost of $14.75.6, and adoption of resolution number 3 schedules a public hearing for October 21, 2019. Next is the adoption of a resolution granting a payment in lieu of taxes to a limited Dividend Housing Association Limited Partnership to be formed by the Lift Foundation for the properties located at 210 Lake Street, 216 Lake Street, 220 Lake Street, 302 Lake Street, 302 Lake Street Rear, 308 Lake Street, 308 Lake Street Rear, 316 Lake Street, and 205 East Stockbridge, and 209 East Stockbridge Avenue, pursuant to sections 35-4 of the Kalamazoo City Code. Next is the adoption of a resolution supporting the application for an acceptance of a grant from the State Historic Preservation Office in the amount of $90,000 to be used for an intensive level historic resource survey in 2020-21. Next is the approval of a position allocation change request to make the .5 FTE part-time plumbing inspector position a 1 FTE full-time plumbing inspector. Next is the approval of a purchase agreement with Artemio Zavalon for the acquisition of 636 Lake Street for the Farmers Market Project and Bank Street Realignment Plan in the amount of $37,000 plus closing costs. And finally, approval of the minutes from the City Commission meetings on July 15, August 5, and September 3, 2019.
Thank you, Commissioner, or Manager Ritzema. The requested actions, a motion to approve the items 1 through 7 and items 9 through 14, and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Moved by Commissioner Urban,
Support.
supported by Commissioner Cooney. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Urban,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott. Yes. Mayor Hopewell,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes, with the exception that I'm abstaining on F10 because even though it is a nonprofit, I have no financial relationship. I am on the board of the nonprofit that's applying for this pilot.
Commissioner Cooney,
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Regular agenda, Mr. Manager.
First reading of an ordinance postponing or delaying the city's opt-in of permitting commercial adult use marijuana establishments in the city until June 1, 2020. Adopting this ordinance permits city staff to begin or to bring proposed zoning and licensing ordinances to the City Commission in conformance with the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, which was adopted by voter initiative last November.
Mr. Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is something that I mentioned to the Commission back in May when you had the retreat. This is basically due to a variety of ongoing, I guess, changes, or at least the motions of things that are occurring at the state level. First off is the Act itself. Attorney General Nessel has formed a study group that I believe are going to be proposing amendments to the Act that the legislature will act upon. Now, whether or not they'll be in place by June 1st, at least we'll have an idea what's working, hopefully working its way through the legislature. Secondly is the fact that the city of Kalamazoo, along with 17 or 18 other communities, have been identified by the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs as a community that has been disproportionately impacted by marijuana enforcement. And as a result, those communities, if marijuana facilities are located in those communities, people applying for license can get up to a 60% discount, if you will, on the license fee from the state. That very well may make Kalamazoo and other communities such as Muskegon, Benton Harbor, Detroit, name just a few of the, and Albion, Niles, those are the ones right off the top of my head. They make those communities very attractive for investors who want to start a marijuana business. So it's something that we may see an increased demand for locating in Kalamazoo. The other change is that the other concern that I have is the state did issue emergency rules in regard to adult use marijuana establishments. Those were issued shortly before the 4th of July, and they are due to expire February 1st. The state can do a variety of things and come February 1st of next year. They can extend the period of emergency and keep them as kind of tentative rules, or they can adopt formal adopted rules that would be in place. And so until we know what that regulatory landscape looks like, I think we want to hedge our bets, because one of the things that have come out of those rules are 4 different types of licenses that are not readily available at statute. There is an excess grower license. There is a license for people to put on temporary events. There's also a kind of it's a business where you can go and imbibe and use marijuana. One of the things I can point out that I've been told by the marijuana regulatory agency officials who are in our town at the end of August and who will be here again Wednesday of this week in regard to the social equity program, is that they are not going to permit alcohol and marijuana consumption in the same venue. So that's something we have to think about in terms of maybe separation distances and the like. The final piece that is, again, I think urges us to move slowly in this realm, well, 2 pieces. First off is the fact that if we have separation distances like we did before, and that we get more people who are clustered, you may recall we used a blind draw. So everybody was equal, if you will, and it had an equal opportunity to get one of the licenses for the, and you heard this from the Millwood representatives earlier this evening at the community meeting, where there's a lot of marijuana businesses that are out in the Davis Creek Park area and adjacent to it, out on East Cork Street. Well, there were more businesses applied for, and due to our separation distances, we had a lottery. And as one, and we also had some also on the east, on the west side. We can't do that for adult use marijuana. The statute prohibits it. And so we have to, as I think staff, how can we work around that? Because I can tell you that based upon the information I've received from other communities where they had some type of scoring system, people who didn't score high enough and weren't given a license decided to sue the community, saying your process was flawed, or you didn't score it correctly, I should have gotten more points, so I would have been entitled to a license. Now I think the communities that face those challenges have been so much successful, but there's still some cases that are ongoing, and there's a lot of time and energy spent in defending that position. because we did a blind lottery, there's no reason to attack the system, and as a result, we've been free from that type of hassle and having to defend our approach to this. And so those are some of the challenges that we're facing. And the final piece is we're just getting underway with on the medical end. It was a year ago or so that we awarded something to the tune of 18 provisional licenses. A year later, only 3 of those businesses are up and running, and although some of them are in the pipeline and will be coming online in the next few months, there is it's not as though we're going to see adult use businesses located immediately. There's still that lead time. And in that regard, and this is important, that with the exception of small grow and the micro business, again, a new type of license, which is kind of a mom and pop, small 150 plant cap, the only people who are going to be eligible to get adult use businesses, adult use licenses for the first 24 months are established medical marijuana businesses. So that's a wrinkle that we have to think about in terms of what's happening in the first 24 months, and then what about after that 24-month period, after 2 years, when it's going to be opened up to a greater community. Finally, and this is just a matter of scope, on the medical side, only 3% of Michigan's population was eligible to receive a medical marijuana certificate, either as a caregiver or as a patient. So I think Michigan's about 8.5 million people. Of that, only 3% of the population had a card that they could go to a marijuana provisioning center and buy marijuana. I don't know what the statistics are for the number of people in Michigan who are 21 years or older, but I imagine it's much more than 3%. And so you've got a significant larger potential consumer base that are going to be looking to go to marijuana retail operations. And what we don't know, and we have to look at, when I say we, the city staff and from the clerk's office planning, my staff, look at what the examples are in those states that have had legalized marijuana to see if there are secondary effects with either the clustering or the separation of retail operations. I guess we don't know at this point whether marijuana is going to be like a pharmacy, or is it going to be more like a liquor store type of operation where you've got oftentimes things that are happening on the premises that are a drag on the neighborhood. And so we're trying to plan for that, and in that regard, and if you do adopt this ordinance, city staff will be reaching out to the community to find out what do potential marijuana users want to see in an ordinance, what do potential marijuana business operators want to see in an ordinance, and what do people who really are concerned about the impact of marijuana on their property and their lives might have to say in regard to a marijuana ordinance. So we're going to be reaching out to find out and get from the community. And to that end, since Millwood has already announced they're going to have some type of panel in November, I will be contacting Mr. Hilliard and seeing if I can attend that and perhaps even sit on the panel if necessary. But I want to be there not only to give information but to receive input from the residents. So we'll be engaged in that effort. Oh, thank you, Mayor, for that opportunity.
Thank you. Questions, commissioners? I got a couple. What are other communities doing?
There was a news article in yesterday's Gazette that a lot of communities are opting out because of the uncertainty. And this doesn't prevent people from using marijuana legally in those communities. It's just they don't want the business operations in their communities. I think there's some concern as to whether or not they'll be good corporate citizens and the like. So many communities are opting out. Most of the townships in Kalamazoo County have opted out. Portage, like ourselves, they've opted out. They opted out soon after the act was passed. But as I understand it, they've said they're leaving the opportunity open to revisit that decision. And so that's kind of what I'm suggesting we do, that at this point, let's see where things settle. see what the roadmap looks like. Let's hear from what our community members are saying before we say yes to this. And we have to opt out. And that's the other key, this important difference. With medical marijuana, we had to take an affirmative action to opt in. With adult use marijuana, we're in unless we opt out. And if we don't opt out, there's no regulations in place.
And so one of the phrases in here is delay opt-in. What does that mean?
Basically, the proposed ordinance would sunset on June 1st of 2020, and by that time, we could have several things can happen. Number one, depending on where we stand, we might ask for it to be extended. That's a possibility, depending on what things develop in the next 7 months. It could be that we might have something in place and we might ask for the commission to repeal that ordinance, and we might have something in place before June 1st, or we would have ordinances, licensing, zoning ordinances brought to you in probably April or May. They would be in place, and then this ordinance would sunset on its own accord.
And so there's no option for us to try to get the state to change their November deadline?
They've announced that November 1st deadline for some period of time, and I doubt that the city of Kalamazoo is going to get the marijuana regulatory agency to change that, because everybody's been shooting for that November 1st date for some time.
And then my last one, well, maybe my last one for now, the social equity piece of this work. So I understand that it helps with fees. I just want to make sure I understand the intent is what?
According to the state, the hope is that in those communities that qualify for the social equity piece, that up to 50% of the adult use businesses will be licensed by people who are taking advantage of the social equity program. Now that's their goal. Now whether or not that occurs or not, I can't tell you. And the only what the state is doing, in addition to giving people a discount on the application, provided you can meet 3 criteria. First off, you have to prove that you've been a resident in that community or in an impacted community for at least 5 years. Now, what that means is that you have to prove that you lived in the Kalamazoo area, kind of. I mean, they were a little bit sketchy as terms of, do you have to live in the city? They made it sound as if you can prove Kalamazoo post office address. As long as you can prove you've lived there for 5 years, or another impacted community, and you're choosing to locate a business in the city limits of Kalamazoo, you get a 25% discount. If you have a marijuana conviction of any kind, except for if you were found responsible or guilty of selling to a minor, then you get another 25% off. And if you can prove that you are a caretaker for between, I think, 2012 and 2017, anytime during that period of time, you get an additional 10%. So you can get up to 60% of the discount on the license fee from the state. In addition, the state is making resources available to people to help people who might be eligible for that through the process of applying for a state license. However, there's no break on any of the other regulatory stuff. If you're going to form a small business and you got to go through like a small corporation, you've got to pay the same fees as anybody else would to apply to the corporation division of the state. If your building you're going to use needs a sprinkler system, you're going to have to install that, and again, you're going to have to meet any fire codes or any building codes that are applicable. So while the state acknowledged that it was difficult for individuals to get involved in the medical side because some of the capitalization requirements, those capitalization requirements are non-existent on the adult use side, and they've reduced many of the licensing fees that the state is going to charge. Again, with this social equity piece. Now, I should point out that if you are in one of the impacted communities, for instance, if I can prove I lived in Benton Harbor for the last 5 years, but I want to locate the business in Kalamazoo, the state's going to say yes to that. And you'll be able to qualify for the equitable piece. So that's what I'm saying is Kalamazoo, Benton Harbor, Muskegon, other places that are on the list of impacted communities may find themselves visited by, say, I don't really want to start my business in Muskegon, even though I may live here. Kalamazoo is a more attractive market for whatever reason. It's a college town. I'm going to make a lot more opportunity there, so they very well may be applying for the social equity piece, even though they don't live in Kalamazoo, but they come from an impacted community in the state. So, and we don't know, I mean, I guess from my perspective and the staff's perspective, we don't know what that really means. Is this going to be a hotbed? Kalamazoo has the potential, I think, to be a hotbed for people who may want to take advantage of the social equity program of the state. Then the other question is, should the city, in going in opening these kind of bits, should we have our own version of some type of social equity program as well? And what would that look like? And so that's what we're going to be reaching out to the community to get some input on.
A couple more questions. So the other urban cores, Grand Rapids, opt in or opt out?
I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they've opted out, but I think they're leaning that direction. I don't know if they've, quite frankly, you can go to the state website and they do have a list of communities that have opted out. I know that Grand Rapids is thinking about it, but again, they are behind us in terms of their medical marijuana. They're at least 9 months behind where we were, as they just permitted it earlier this spring. But I don't know how they're going to deal with adult use.
Battle Creek?
Battle Creek, I believe, is going to be opening up for business by November 1st, I think. They've decided to, when I say opt in, you're opted in whether you like it or not. The way to say it is Battle Creek, to my knowledge, is not opted out.
And then what's the magic of June 1?
It was actually in consultation with the clerk's office because 2020 is the presidential election year. He's got a primary in the early spring, he's got a May election, and then he's got one in August for a state primary. And so I said to Mr. Borling, what works best if we decide to have a local license and you're going to be inundated with people seeking an adult use license? He said, after the May election, but before the August one. I said, June 1st will work. So it was to accommodate the clerk's busy election schedule.
Mr. Clerk, can you comment on that schedule at all?
Yeah, so the presidential primary will be in March, second week in March, I think. And we're expecting that to be a big election. When you think of a primary, there's going to be a lot of interest in this one. That's going to be a big election for us. We're planning for a May election, and because there's a shorter than normal time period between the March and the May election, if I were thinking of a time, when would be a good time for me in my office to be working, to have the time to work on this with the attorney, and then also be able to take applications in, that was my estimate.
Okay.
And June 1st is a city commission meeting, I believe, next year.
All right. Not for me. Very good. Any other questions for the city attorney? Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on this item, please step forward. You'll have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Good evening.
I'm Nehemiah Scudder, and you all know me. And I think now that we're legalizing marijuana, you could just legalize it. Quit all the codes and taxes and opting out and opting in and junk like that. Just legalize it, for goodness sake.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
How you doing? My name is Corey Smith. I am a resident of Kalamazoo. I'm also a candidate for mayor of Kalamazoo. A lot of the tactics which I heard the attorney speaking of is more like is some people who want to opt in and then some people who are just, it sounds like more like scare tactics. But that money also could be used for different things. I have a solution for affordable housing. We have to opt in to allow residential marijuana dispensaries to open in the zoning area where they're allowed. We would then be able to receive a 15% access and take that and put it into the condemned houses and the vacant lots, make them into apartments, and then the family-friendly rent. Then we take the money from that and make it family-rentable. Then the money collected from the rent for the house payments, we will support the program. The money from the houses then will support the program. Once the houses program is self-sufficient, we build youth centers and run it by elected youth peer, but we put adults in there to oversee them. And then we can also take that money and put it to park and family playgrounds. And finally, if we put a zoo downtown, we will be bringing families from all around our communities to increase business in downtown. Also, meet the needs of workers to renovate the buildings and the homes that we're planning on rebuilding. First, we train the homeless and the jobless, and return to training, they will donate a set amount of hours working for the city. And to fight blight, we help our affordable housing situation. I say add an extra amount taxes to the owners of properties in the violations of city codes. Once the owners resolve all violations and the home passes inspections, the owners will receive a voucher for X amount of dollars. They can use it for winter or summer. If they move families into these homes, they will be given a bigger voucher. I want to see ideal boxes placed different locations throughout the city. These boxes will be, anyone can fill them out from the ages 6 to 20 who has an idea or a concern to the city. Let's save our youth and make Kalamazoo a city, light for beacon of hope, a city of brightness, and for our kids' futures. We have to stop forgetting about the youth and the families of Kalamazoo. We have to put them first. Then we want to take these community, or they are our leaders of tomorrow. We start by showing them that Kalamazoo cares. So what I believe is we should opt in, because it's a lot more than just the marijuana that's involved. These things have been going on anyways. They legalize alcohol. Alcohol kills thousands of people a year. I never looked on the news and seen where someone smoking marijuana who, or even was under the influence of marijuana, have hurt or killed anyone. Thank you for your time. You have a blessed day.
Thank you. Next, please. Please make sure that you folks sign in, if you would, with the sign-in sheet, please. Good evening.
Thanks again, City Commission. Jevin Weinberg from Portage, Michigan. I'm a minority owner and general manager of a 35,000 square foot grow on Mill Cork and a processor that's on Kilgore Road. And I think for the opt-out part of it, I think there may be the unintended consequence of when you opt out, it also affects the grows and processors that may want to distribute to retail facilities around the state that do have their rec licenses. So doing a blanket opt-out, I don't think is the right thing to do, the right answer. You know, I understand the high bar that's set from the retail facilities and the demand that's put on those facilities when recreational does happen. There's a huge demand on those facilities when medical is happening. So, you know, of course there's going to be a huge demand when rec opens for them. But by doing a blanket opt-out, you also cost anybody that has a grow license or a processor license the chance to apply for their rec license, and that's just a distribution license. There's no retail component to those facilities, and they may want to, I know we will probably want to distribute to recreationally licensed businesses across the state way before June 1st. So keep that in mind. I see this as the first reading. I think there hopefully is time to tweak it a little bit. A blanket opt-out to me is not the right answer. I think you can carve out the grows and processors, open up the licensing from a state standpoint. I've read the emergency rules. Really the only difference between the medical and rec license is that the product itself has to stay separated. So when it's in a storage facility, the rec product will stay separate from the medical product. When it's on the floor of the retail locations, you'll have a checkout area for recreational customers, and you'll have a separate checkout area for medical patients only. And the medicine itself will stay separate as well, although it'll be essentially the same products. There'll be separate checkouts and separate inventories and things like that. So while I understand the retail component is a heavier weight on the city's staff, I don't think allowing, like I said, the grows and processors to apply, it's the same inspection, if any really inspection. Only the people that are already medically licensed can get that licensed. I think that should stay, you should open that up. And really for the grows and processors, there really should be no closing of really the application window for those properties, in my opinion. They're only allowed in select industrial zones. Just keep the window open like you do any other business application. Secondly, don't take the rec chance away just because there's uncertainty. With the grows and processors, I think there is a lot of certainty there, and we should be allowed the flexibility to apply for that license if we have the business wherewithal to do it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Please sign in, sir. Oh, no, I'm talking to him. Good evening, sir.
Andrew Argo, I live in the Vine neighborhood. I actually just had a couple thoughts about this. I've been doing a lot of thinking about kind of building that very specific bridge. We're at a much better place than we were about a year ago. I was really hemming and hawing about like the lack of kind of the social equity piece, and I'm glad that's something that is kind of on the city attorney's mind, and I'm sure on the rest of your minds as well. One of the things that I've been looking at a whole lot, and if we're talking about how to kind of take the statewide social equity piece and make sure that it's applied mostly to city residents here who either were a part of the underground marijuana economy or who have been basically marginalized because of the prohibition on cannabis. Something that I've seen that's worked, not one-to-one specifically for marijuana or cannabis businesses, but I've seen there's a lot of municipalities here in the United States. They've particularly had a lot of success with this in the UK of doing this kind of cooperative buy-in where you have basically like a workers' co-op structure where it's not just like a single person trying to start a business, but several people. I think this would be a very much more manageable way for a lot of the city residents to do that, because speaking as somebody, I grew up in the Edison neighborhood. I knew a lot of people who they were their parents were selling marijuana just to pay the bills and keep the lights on. A lot of those people, even with a lot of these new social equity incentives, it might not be something that they could actually visualize in their finish line. But if you had a group of individuals who were able to kind of invest together while getting kind of a 50-50 buy-in from the city, and our city does have certain resources I think could be pushed into that. Not only do you keep the money from those marijuana businesses flowing through our local economy, but you're making sure people locally here in Kalamazoo who have generationally been affected by marijuana prohibition are the ones who actually profit from it here in the city of Kalamazoo. Again, hopefully that's something that kind of is kept in mind as we work through this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jay Fleming. I am a resident of the Stewart neighborhood. I'm also a caregiver and have been since 2011. I wanted to thank the city and city attorney, Clyde, for working on this. I think a delayed opt-in is the best way to approach this. About a year ago, I had secured about $500,000 in financing to start a business in Kalamazoo, and due to the limited licensing and the real estate market in Kalamazoo and the way things out, that wasn't even close to enough to start a business here. I think that the social equity piece, along with other license types like micro businesses and the micro grows, could give the city of Kalamazoo a lot of tools to use zoning-wise to try and limit some of that interest from larger businesses, larger money businesses that do things like buy up multiple lots of property for our lotteries so that they have more tickets in the basket and things like that. I wholly appreciate this approach and think that the city needs to take a more measured approach than what we did with the medical. And thank you much. I appreciate you talking about this. And to answer your question about Grand Rapids, I just saw within this week, Grand Rapids is having a very similar discussion to what you are tonight. They have spoken about opting in, but they're in a similar position that they're not comfortable exactly with the way that the medical opt-in that they took rolled out, and that they're looking for other avenues and other approaches to try and come up with a more creative solution to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Creed Stiegel of Kalamazoo, resident. As I listened to this discussion, I realized there's a Kalamazoo County Substance Abuse Task Force who hasn't presented their opinion on what's going on, as I've found. But seeing that we having a problem of opting in or opting out, that I feel that there should be a task force that can look into the legality aspects of it, as far as certain sales, or how close it is to schools, how students might get a hold to it, like we're having this vaping problem. What bank is going to secure the money, you know? How will they launder the money? You know, so often we don't look at how this can explode into a lot of money coming through this system and have no accountability. So I think there should be some more investigation on what's the federal thoughts on this, because it's still not legal in the federal courts. You know, if it becomes too big, if it becomes an enterprise where it's organized, not just here in Kalamazoo. They can send people in here, you know. So there's a lot more to look at just opting in, you know. The law enforcement, the banking, and the security that our children will be safe once they get a hold to this stuff, which they will, just like this vaping problem we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Hello, Mark Rupert, 801 Oakland Drive, Kalamazoo. I think it's confusing a little bit. We've allowed, 14 breweries in the area now at this point, and I see that moving forward, somebody had mentioned earlier the micro marijuana business, you know, to opt out, even temporarily, is going to stall so many more things that could happen, like the consumption lounges, the micro marijuana business allowing 150 people or 150 plants. It will build a craft marijuana area for tourism, just like you see with all the beer that we do now. I know that as many breweries as are open, we've definitely been affected, and I see that there's been a couple others that have closed, and I'll see a whole lot more opening. But it has created an environment downtown where people come here specifically out of state and everywhere else to be a part of something. Now, if you're going to opt out completely, I feel like it's going to restrict a lot of things moving forward. If you just kind of jump in and say hello, then I think it's going to be more embraced by the community, because we've already been wanting it. It's already been here for 30, 40 plus years, and now we have an opportunity to stay ahead of the game and create something that might be a whole new level of Kalamazoo. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to address this item? Seeing no one?
If I may.
Mr. Attorney?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address some of the concerns that were raised by the speakers. First off, The only money that the city is going to receive if we opt in is we get to charge up to a $5,000 license fee. But again, our license fee has to reflect our actual costs. So if it doesn't cost us $5,000 to license, we can't charge that much. We can only charge the actual administrative cost, but there's a cap. So that's what we would get if we choose to do a local license. Secondly, the adult use marijuana will collect a 10% excise tax on their sales. All that money will go to the state, and 15% of that money is reserved for municipalities who have micro businesses and retail establishments in them, and then you get a prorated share. So you take all of the number of micro businesses and adult use retail businesses across the state, and whatever percentage you have, as a municipality, you get 15%, you get that percentage of the 15% that the state collects. And I don't know what that's going to be. So that's the only money that we can charge. The city cannot charge any additional tax on adult use marijuana. Secondly, in terms of a carve-out for the growers and processors that do exist, that does, then that creates a problem for the micro businesses, the small 150 grow operations. They really need to be, how the big operators going to deal with the small operators. There is, again, a new license for the excess grower, and these are going to be, again, the big operations that are going to be able to take advantage of that. That's a new license that the state has created. Secondly, in terms of having the city get involved with marijuana, unfortunately, marijuana is unlawful at federal law. We receive a lot of federal grant money. And if we are, if you will, in the business, or, and I don't want to be crude, but if we're in bed with marijuana businessmen, depending on what administration is doing things in Washington, that may find ourselves federal monies drying up. I can see where the Trump administration might take a dim view of that. So we have to be very careful about that. Finally, at least in regard to adult uses, you had the suggestion earlier this evening from the Millwood folks that they'd like to see a half-mile separation distance. The state law is pretty clear, 1,000 feet from a school. That's the only limitation that we can enforce. And in fact, the state says if you want to be less than 1,000 feet, that's fine. So although they don't say you can go more than 1,000, the clear impression is that if we put a separation distance of more than 1,000 feet from a K through 12 school, that's going to run afoul of state law. We can make it closer if we want, but we're stuck with that 1,000-foot zone from a school. So I think that kind of, and in regard to the Substance Abuse Council, they did come out against medical marijuana, and I wouldn't think that their position is going to be much different in regard to recreation. I think they did come out against the proposition that was being considered last fall. So I think that covers all of the points that were raised by the speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Commissioners, the requested actions, a motion to
First reading.
to adopt the motion to offer this for first reading. Is there a motion? Moved by Commissioner Urban, supported by Commissioner Anderson. We are in discussion mode. Commissioner Cunningham.
One, I want to thank Attorney Robinson for a lot of the insight that he's provided, a lot of leadership in regards to taking up this issue. As mentioned, it is very time-consuming, and it's very important, I think, to the economy and the small business infrastructure of our community. I have an additional kind of question for you, though, also. For the social equity component that removes barriers, if we delay the opt-in, can you kind of elaborate on the negatives or the positives of that component?
I don't know that I can say negative or positive in that everybody, if we delay, is going to be similarly affected. And so when the city chooses to open it up, any individual who is eligible for that social equity piece would be able to take advantage of it at that time. All we're doing is just kind of kicking the can down the road. And in that regard, again, I'd like to explore if we want to do something as a local community. We already know what the state's doing. And my concern is this. The social equity piece, and I know what the state has attempted to do, but I don't know that it goes far enough, and it doesn't really focus on necessarily residents of that community. As I said, if I'm from Muskegon, I choose to, and that's an impacted community, but I want to open my business in Kalamazoo, I can. What does that say for Kalamazoo residents in terms of their impact? The other concern that I have is they talk about impact to a community, but I've lived in Kalamazoo now since shortly after I became city attorney. Technically, I could qualify for a 25% reduction if I wanted to open a business. I don't know that I've been negatively impacted by marijuana enforcement, but I qualify. And so how do we get to really make this thing work for people who are truly impacted? And what can we do as a community to say that let's see what we can do to make sure it's Kalamazoo, City of Kalamazoo residents who are impacted, who can take advantage of that. That's what I want to explore. So that's the best answer I can give to your question, Commissioner.
So I guess, one, thank you for that explanation. And as I see it, or how I view it, is that this delay will put us in a position to effectively build up individuals in our community to take advantage of this social equity component. And I think that's a space that I would advise our administration to be intentional on. In regards to the comments about other individuals coming outside of our community who are negatively impacted, I'm not negative. So I guess I acknowledge the portion of somebody who has more resources, who wasn't necessarily negatively impacting, still taking advantage. Now, I'm talking about those who are negatively impacted. One of the mindsets I want to get our community out of is us versus them type of stand. So if you are negatively impacted, and maybe it was in Ben Harbor or any other community, and you decide to move your business to Kalamazoo, I'm not opposed to that. But I want to see the intentionality of making sure, if we can, to place some other components in place. Therefore, we weed out who should or should not be receiving these opportunities. So I'm not necessarily saying that we have to ensure that it's only Kalamazooans. Obviously, that is a passion of mine. I would love for our community to take advantage, but I definitely want to go on record in saying, if this is the will of the commission to delay, it is my ask of the administration that we are very intentional on preparing not only the zoning and the other nuances that go into creating this ordinance, but that we are also preparing our citizens to take advantage of this opportunity and being very intentional on that space.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cuddy?
So I want to thank the city attorney for being so much abreast of this whole thing and helping us to understand where we need to go. What do you think about the idea of not having a blanket hold on, but allowing growing now at this point?
Well, I guess the problem is, and I'm trying to think if there's a grow operation that has recently started. I think not. And so I don't know that we're really harming anything, because I don't think there's a grow operation up and operating in the city. And in that regard, again, and I'm concerned. We know that at least the grow operations that are going to, if they're in the pipeline, they're already on the medical side. They've got their medical license, and they're going to be the first ones to qualify for the adult use. I don't think a delay of 6 or 7 months is going to make a difference in terms of their ability to get a license. Now, obviously, they want to get that license sooner rather than later so they can get a profit, but their pro forma, when they got the medical marijuana license, was not based on recreational. Recreational was a thought on the horizon. They applied for a medical marijuana license, and that's what they got. And so while they may wish to take advantage of this opportunity, their pro forma should have been based on medical only. Secondly, again, the key here is the micro business. This is, again, the small mom and pop 150 plant, which they can grow, process, and sell all in one location. And I want to figure out with, again, the assistance of staff and with the assistance of the community, how many of those businesses do we want to have located, where they should be located? Should we, again, what can we do? Because that's really the social equity piece in terms of making it easier for people to get started. And I appreciate the remarks of Commissioner Cunningham, because I don't want to set up a wall and say, yeah, we're not going to be inviting to other people, other communities, but I don't want the individual who lives in Muskegon, who has he's got an income of a six-figure income and decides to come into Kalamazoo and start a business, as opposed to the folks in our community who are only making $25,000 to $50,000 in terms of an income, and they lived here and they've been impacted by marijuana enforcement and giving them an opportunity to start a business. That's my concern. Whereas I want that social equity piece to be truly a social equity piece.
Good, thank you, I agree.
Other questions? Mr. Anderson.
I just want to be clear about this, because we've had the opportunity to have multiple conversations about this over some months. We've had a presentation here in town by the group from Laura that's presenting on the social equity piece. That's been here in town, that's open. That what we are setting up on the delay side here is not because, well, I can't just do the work, I don't have time. And what the situation is here is we have a lot of uncertainty. We have the Attorney General who has a study group proposed. We have emergency rules, correct?
Yes.
But no permanent rules. We don't know what the permanent rules are. There are other kinds of things going on related with this. So what we are doing here is setting ourselves up for this to be as successful as possible, waiting for some things to become clearer as it relates to state law. Is that accurate?
Yes, and if I might add, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency will be back in Kalamazoo on the 18th to give another social equity presentation. It'll be in the Van Dusen Room at the Public Library. However, you do have to reserve a spot. Now, I didn't check their website today to see if there's any slots open. There were slots open a couple of weeks ago, but you have to reserve through the state's website to attend that social equity program. I think it starts at 10 and is supposed to run till noon or maybe even as late as 2. The 19th is a different program. That is for people who wants to know about how to apply for adult licenses, and that program is closed. But the 18th is a social equity presentation, so of this week, right? So yeah, the Licensing and Regulatory Agency will be in Kalamazoo on 2 separate days. As I understand it, yeah, the Wednesday the 18th is social equity. Thursday the 19th is about if you want to apply for an adult license. But the Thursday one is closed. The Wednesday one, I may be still open if you're interested in that.
Other questions, commissioners? So I have a couple things. I rest in the realm of the social equity piece is the one that I'm most concerned with ensuring that occurs. We dove into medical marijuana, and I've talked to you and others about some of the other communities that did some heavy-duty social equity pieces like percent of ownership of people of color to hiring and wages expected and all those things. And I think we missed the boat in not doing some of that. We did some, but at the level of some communities. That's not going to make everybody happy, but there's not many faces that have walked up here that look like me that are going to own and stuff. So and I get it. You know, it is what it is, but if there's a way to improve the opportunity for everyone, you know, we have people talking about wanting things in this community to be better for everyone. This is one of those things that we need to look at through a very much on everyone's lens. Whether someone has a personal want for this or that or whatever, how do we make it so that everyone prospers? We had an opening of an amazing new business in our community today, which during my comments, I'm going to have the owner come up, and that was about social equity. That was about wealth increasing. So, you know, I want to see folks that are women and people of color and those that are marginalized that have the opportunity to own, not just work at. And if this helps us get there, I'm all about that. This is not a commission, and it's just interesting sometimes to me. We are not a commission that is against marijuana, never have been. It's about the how. So I appreciate someone saying we should just do it. I'm not sure that's the way it was intended, because the state doesn't allow us to just do. So you want to change state law, then go ahead and do that, but the state law does not allow us to just do. We just heard some of that. This is about the how. That's why I'm glad the words was delayed opt-in, because I'm a believer we need to opt in. We should opt in. But it's about the how it's done, and we can all say this is this and it should be this way. I get it. But not everybody at that podium said the same thing. We had one saying, well, let's figure out something different with grow. We had someone saying, just go, 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 just let everybody do it. We had someone else saying, if you don't opt in, you know, that's going to cause challenges for us. And then we had someone saying, yeah, you need to opt out and look at this thing and move it. So it's interesting to me that in a day when we want equity and we want to do things right, that when we look at doing things at the highest level, we get hammered, and then if we don't, we get hammered. It's and I don't want to say hammered, but we get encouraged to do one or the other. It's interesting. I guess 16 years of being up here, it's always interesting, and I love it. The one thing I do think I want to know more about is, you mentioned regarding the grow operations, that there's another license that would it allow them to keep operating and sell to other people? Or if we opt out or delay opt-in, will it prevent them from doing it?
You're talking about the excess grow license?
I'm trying to figure out what the comment meant.
Oh,
So,
if the commission adopts this ordinance, there would be no ability for anybody to get an adult use license of any kind in Kalamazoo until we open the window.
so could we opt in on grow?
I don't recommend it. I suppose,
I-
yes, we could, if the commission wants to piecemeal this, you could. The problem is, we don't have a zoning ordinance in place that says you may have an adult use business grow operation at this location or in this type of zone.
Yeah, see, so my difficulty there is that we've already committed to grow. For God's sakes, we've sold them property that is owned by the city. I don't think when I voted to sell that property or to opt in the medical marijuana, that we didn't have an understanding that when recreational occurred, that the grow operations would want to sell outside of our city. It seems to me there should be something that allows them not to sell within Kalamazoo. I don't know if "sell" is the right word, but should allow them to operate their business so that they can deliver and grow for other communities that have opted in. To me, that doesn't make any sense for me, from an economic sense of supporting an operation that we've already approved and believe should be working and going. I don't get the logic.
Well,
With the exception of the social equity piece, but the difference is we don't have social equity at the level regarding grow operations now that we have, and we have 2 of them that are building. So I don't know that unless the social equity rules change, well, I guess the challenge I'm having is we've offered to allow these folks to operate, knowing full well, and I'll say to those that invested there, just because medical marijuana was passed, there was no guarantee there was going to be a market all over the state because people could opt out, and people have. So I appreciate the premise, but the premise isn't supported necessarily, except for those that did opt in, and then you have to get the business for those communities, and that's your work. So some of this is just, as a business, you got to run your business, and you're successful, you're not successful, what have you. But what I'm trying to understand, though, is there an option, though, that allows for social equity and allows us to allow those businesses that already exist, that are operating, to move forward?
To answer your question, and I defer to the clerk because he keeps his finger on the pulse, as I understand it, there are no grow operations currently operating in the city.
Correct.
So with that, I don't know that this would negatively impact anybody. Now, if they come online as medical grow operations, and again, it's based on the feedback that we get from the community, there's nothing that would preclude the city commission revisiting this ordinance before June of next year and opening it up for grow operations if, based on the comments that we received, that's a good idea. That's a possibility. But at this point, I think we are best off just saying we're not going to permit any adult use licenses in the city until we get ordinances in place and community feedback.
Mr. Clerk, how many grow operations do we have licensed?
There are none that have both their state license and their city permit and are up and operating.
And Mr. Manager, the facilities, the properties that we sold, are those, well, and this is for you too, Mr. Clerk, are those the two, do you have a sense that most of the grow operations that have applied, okay, not had a license, have applied, are they building structures, or are they in facilities already? So.
I can think of 3 that are building from the ground up. The others, I'm not sure. I think there are structures already in place there.
And how many are those?
I'd have to look. I'm thinking it's either 5 or 6 actual entities. They can stack the licenses, so I'm not going to talk about licenses.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you talk about actual sites, facilities, I think it's 5 or 6. I can get that information for you specifically.
And then, so I'm assuming the ones that are building probably won't, or will be close to having their buildings finished by the time we have, and this is where I was going to go to you, Mr. Manager, in the community planning and development, if we have an understanding of where at least 2 of the grow operations that are being built, maybe there's a third, where they are in their process of build.
Rebecca, you want to come up here and answer?
Because we have one that's already dug a hole, the other one hasn't dug a hole, so I don't think a building pops up quickly and
I would point out the commission took action in July to extend the opportunity because their provisional licenses were supposed to expire. And some of these businesses didn't even have site plans submitted to the city. And the commission decided to extend that as far as they could go. If you could get it in on the 30th of July, you were golden, even though you've kind of been sitting on your hands. So I know that recently, and I'll let the director speak, several of those operations have gone through site plan review, but I don't know how many of them have completed that review.
They've both completed that review. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners, Vice Mayor. They've all completed their site plan reviews. They all have property control, which is also extremely important. So the purchase agreements have been completed. These are in Davis Creek Business Park, specifically, are the two that I'm discussing. One thing that we needed to work through with the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority was the stormwater agreements, because Davis Creek Business Park has had significant contamination in the past, and the stormwater system is the city's. It is not sold to the developer, and so we have been working with both developers that have purchased sites in Davis Creek Business Park, and that's been a long process for us as well. But those developers are all set with.
Are the principals from those organizations here in the room? Anyone that you? I don't know if you know who they are.
They are not.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they know about this, so they're probably their facilities aren't going to be built by then, so it's probably less of an issue.
Probably. I haven't heard from either of them.
And one other thing, Madam Director, do the ones that are not constructing something have to come before site plan review?
That are not constructing something.
Yeah, if you're going to be a grow operation in our city.
Depends. It depends. If it's a significant change of use, or if they've rezoned, there are a couple different triggers for a site plan review. If you're revitalizing a building and adding to it, those would all trigger site plan review.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Clerk?
I can say that all 18 of the facility applicants went through site plan review or have applied.
All 18, whether it's grow or whether it's
Correct.
Have applied.
Correct.
For
all of the applicants who have been issued provisional approval certificates have either completed site plan review or applied through site plan review. They're going through site plan review.
Okay. All right. So my last question would be, can we do this in 6 months? I mean, I understand the capacity issue. I get it. There's an election. Can we do this in less than? Can we do this by April 1? I don't know that we know what the state's going to do necessarily. I don't know that what that. I'm trying to find some middle ground here to help folks, but we may not be able to do that.
Well, there's a lot on everybody's plate in terms of my office, the clerk's office, and planning and zoning. Mr. Borling and I, along with Pete Eldridge, who's the zoning administrator, had a meeting last week, and we were, again, in preparation for this, and we felt guardedly optimistic that we could get it done by June 1st. But given the elections, given some of the initiatives that the planning and zoning is working with, some of the tasks that my office has been asked to look into, our plates are full. And it's just a question of capacity and getting the work done. And fortunately, because we've been through this with medical, that helps us a little bit. But there's some new wrinkles to this. And as I said, I think the big piece is the outreach to the community. Unlike, like I said, with medical, while there was some outreach, it really was somewhat limited. We came up with an ordinance, and we reached out and got some feedback and made some changes based upon that feedback. But again, you're talking about 3% of the population. The people who we talked with were the people who wanted to open up businesses. There were very few patients or caregivers that appeared at those meetings. I fully expect if we go into outreach with recreational marijuana, we're going to get a lot more citizens who are concerned about how's my property going to be impacted if there's a marijuana business on the corner. There's going to be people who said, hey, I want to be able to use this because much as I would be able to use any legal substance, what are their interests? And finally, the business community itself in terms of I'd like to operate a business, and what is the social equity piece going to look like?
Commissioner Griffin?
So we have until November 1st to make this decision?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Cunningham?
I just have one extra comment, just to say, you know, I understand the importance of understanding your workload. I respect how you guys have gone about business thus far as I've been a servant to this commission, but I want to say that this opportunity presented itself on the ballot, and the city of Kalamazoo overwhelmingly voted yes to it. Now, mind you, that doesn't take into account what the state statutes and components that have kind of transpired since the actual election, but it's rare that we find an opportunity where 70+% of the community is saying yes to something. And so I don't think that this is something that we put on the back burner. I think it's a high priority, and you know, we sometimes get into the situation of need versus must-have, or need versus very important. That's what I wanted to say. So need versus very important. And so, you know, I think that once a new commission comes on board, if this gets delayed, that we are active in convening and having this conversation early as possible to make sure that you guys have the energy and to reorganize whatever some of your priorities to ensure that this is one. Mind you, you know, that'll kind of be dictated by the new commission.
Well, on that same note, I guess for Director Kick and yourself, we have a public participation plan. I would have thought that we'd be talking about that. Do we have that prepared for this? If we're talking about delaying, and part of it's public participation, have we started planning what that looks like? Do we have something to demonstrate what that's going to be, so we can tell folks?
I'll defer to the director. We've had some preliminary discussions as to what we might do, but I don't think we've got we're going to follow the public participation plan. So we've got the bones, we just haven't put the meat on the bones yet.
Correct. I've been speaking with City Planner Christina Anderson, and I know the Assistant City Planner Pete Eldridge have both been meeting about what our strategy would be if we were asked to move forward with the ordinance.
Okay.
So, absolutely, always focused on that.
All right, thank you. So being that this is, Commissioner?
Just one last comment to kind of go on record. Once again, for our next commission is something to think about is maybe bringing on a consultant to assist with that workload also.
Yeah, we have to know when we need help, and then, so these 7 people get to allocate more resources if we want something to move faster. So I think that's a good point, and we haven't been asked for that. You may get asked for that if we decide that this doesn't move forward, and it's okay for you to say, well, you know, you're going to have to bring somebody in because we can't get it done. So that's potential. Being that this is first reading too, I'm less concerned, but I guess I'd like a couple of things sort of for our next, when we read this for final reading, would like a draft that is 67, whatever, 80% of what the public participation will look like, so that we're telling folks what's next. It's not a mystery. And then second, I'd like to see if someone from Laura is I hate acronyms, that's why I always try to, Licensing and Regulatory Affairs Bureau of the State of Michigan, can come and talk about the social equity side. That doesn't mean I'm referring to asking. I understand we don't control their schedules. I understand we can't force anyone to come. I don't need that. I'm saying that I want to know that we reached out and said that Kalamazoo and our community has a lot of questions, knowing that the meeting's happening on the 18th, understood, and the meeting on the 19th, understood, but that night it would be nice to see if we could have someone here to see if there's any other questions that we can get answered while in our session, while we're recording it, and while it's being broadcast to our community, which I don't think that 18th meeting is going to be. However, if we can get that on public access and broadcast to the community, especially for those that could not register to be there, to learn more, that probably changes my thinking in regards to trying to get someone here on the night that we take this up. And Commissioners, I want to remind you that we still have 2 other meetings in October. And we don't like bringing heavy-duty items before an election, but it has occurred. Just keeping that in mind, and just to let everyone know, we don't meet the Monday before the election. That's why there's only 2 other meetings before the swearing-in ceremony, and we don't typically vote on something like this the first night that new folks will be sitting up here. We really don't want to throw that in their plate the first night.
Well,
and we couldn't because it would be after November 1st anyway. So, yeah, I'm anticipating what he's about to
and you
tell me.
guys adjourn sine die so that everything's
Yeah,
halts
but
and there's no carryovers.
Right, but it's November 1st. It's our deadline.
But then we need 10 days for the ordinance to take effect.
Correct.
So our deadline is actually the second meeting in October at the latest.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for the help. All right. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Motion carried. For the media that's in this room, because I know how this is going to get spun, potentially. Clearly, this commission is open to marijuana, recreational in our community. We are trying to address the how it occurs in Kalamazoo. That's what this commission has done. So as we do our big headlines, Kalamazoo, opts out, all this, yeah, well, make sure you tell the whole story of the discussion and dialogue that took place in here tonight, even in the 1.5 minutes of a television spot or the lines within an online article on MLive. This commission is not standing here saying we have a belief that there should never be recreational marijuana in our community. Just like with medical, it's about the how. And just like with medical, we had a number of things we dove into and sent back and reworded and all that stuff with a whole bunch of community input, and we're in that same situation here. So I just wanted to be clear about that. However you use that, you'll use it. Mr. Manager, G1, please.
Acceptance of grant 2019-137 from the Irving S. Gilmore Foundation in the amount of $500,000 to support improvements to the Kalamazoo Farmers Market. And Your Honor, I'd like to call forward our Parks and Recreation Director, Sean Fletcher, for a brief presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Director.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the time. I will try and give you just kind of an overview of where we're currently at so you understand where we're headed. I'd also like to thank, I know you have to vote, but I'd like to thank the Irving S. Gilmore Foundation for their willingness to help us with this project. We've been working, actually you can show the image now if you'd like, Scott. Thank you. We've been working, the market team has been working for a little over a year to kind of tighten up some of the planning that we've been doing for quite a while. And we've kind of gotten to a point where we feel good about this rendering that you see in front of you. There are some landmarks I'll just point out real quick. Lake Street, Bank Street, obviously, and I'll talk a little bit about that intersection. The top of the diagram shows 375 parking spaces. That is, that arrow is kind of the railroad tracks, if you will, that run alongside that site. And then to the south, where you see a lot of the parking, that is where the MRC building used to be located. That parking area does not look that good right now. It's not striped or anything, so it's a little crazy on market days. So we've also, as part of this tightening up this plan, we've been working with our friends in public services regarding Bank Street. You approved an item earlier for a home that we've purchased as the city to do that realignment.
Mr. Director, could I interrupt for just 1 second. So I see the media is packing up, which I think
Which surprises
which
me.
is interesting. We are talking about the 24th best farmers market in the nation, and it's not marijuana, and we have the media leaving on this. I just think it's unconscionable. This is something that this community loves and adores and is amazing for so many different reasons. And I just think it's interesting. So that's my comments. Mr. Director, continue.
Completely agree, sir. So, as I was saying, we have been working closely with our friends in Public Services regarding the realignment of Bank Street. One of the things that we discovered in meeting with them is when they construct that street, they will be not working in the road per se. So we were kind of thinking we had to combine some construction with the realignment of Bank Street and some work on that site, but we really don't have to do that. Public Services can build that road, and they can really do it whenever we need them to do it. So just a couple things also about the site. You kind of see the darker reddish brown long strip. That would be the new bank of vendor stalls that would be constructed. We are going to maintain the two kind of the pinkish, lighter rows of sheds. Those are existing. Those would all be refurbished, and then the new row, they would all look the same. So we will do some refurbishment, and we will do some new construction. The kind of the reddish brown square and rectangle combination, kind of in the center of the screen, if you will, that is the future phase event shed that will be added, probably at a later date. What we are going to work on in 2020, and this is what I wanted to give you just a quick update on, is we will refurbish the existing sheds and build the new sheds. And then this will probably make a lot of people excited that attend the market. If you've ever been to the market, there's almost always a line to go to the bathroom. So the small restroom building that's kind of in between the two lighter pinkish rows of sheds, where the current restroom building is and office is now, that'll get a makeover, and we will double the amount of toilets and sinks that are currently there. So that will, yes, that's very exciting. Don't get excited about toilets very often, but that's one time we can. And again, we've been working with Director Baker on the realignment of Bank Street and Lake. We purchased the final house, so we're moving forward on that. The other thing that we've been working with Public Services on and our friends at the County Parks Department is the KRVT, which will go from Upjohn Park and take you through or next to the farmers market. It will be on the west side of Bank Street at this point. You would have a dedicated sidewalk and a protected bike lane along Bank Street, so people will be able to cycle through Upjohn Park and then right to the farmers market. The thought was you will have restrooms there. That's a good place for people to maybe stop and just check out the farmers market or continue on down south. That work that will be done in 2020, we're working very closely with the folks from the People's Food Co-op to coordinate when we would do that work. We've decided in working with our friends in Public Services that we can really build the sheds during the winter if we have to. We really want to not interrupt the market if at all possible. The market is very popular. It goes through mid-November. We want to try and be respectful of that, obviously, and we're going to work with the food co-op folks to make sure that they can have a successful market throughout most of the year, if at all possible, the entire year. Some future phases. The intent of building the sheds is you're going to have heavy equipment in there. You don't want to do the site work first and then have all the heavy equipment come in and damage curbing and asphalt and such. So build the sheds, refurbish the restroom building, get that work done, and then the next year you would come in and do all of the site work. There would be electrical improvements, plenty of bike racks. We do have a dedicated location. If you kind of see the small boxes near the south where the MRC building was, where the parking is. The food trucks will be positioned in that area, so people coming from that lot would walk right
Mr.
past
Director,
them.
would you say like right of the screen, left of the
I'm sorry.
screen? Not everyone knows
And
what
I'm
MRC is or anything.
Terrible with right and left, so it's on my left, which is opposite of the Lake Street. So it's the south part of the market is where the food trucks would be located. As I mentioned, the activity shed would be a future phase. There is a playground slated for the site, which is between the new shed, new vendor stalls, and the activity event shed. You can kind of see it's a green area with some little different shapes in it. And then that's really it. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know this has been a long time coming. We have secured some additional funding for the KRVT segment. So we have some dollars from the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund for that work. And then obviously you'll vote on this grant.
Mr. Cunningham.
I had two questions. One being, the mayor mentioned how successful our farmers market has been, and there's two things that I really appreciate about the farmers market. The first being, the ability to come down and easily find parking. Can you kind of touch on the parking opportunities where it expanded or contracted in regards to that space?
Yeah, the new site would have approximately 375 parking spaces. Roughly 250 now, 260. It really depends on how parking gets done in that south MRC lot. If you get 2 or 3 cars spaced out, it really, reduces the number. But we would roughly be adding a little over 100 spaces to the site.
And then the second component is a little more of a subjective question, I guess. One of the things I really appreciated about the farmers market was its intimacy. Do you have any comments, maybe it'll be personal versus some concrete, on with the expansion of this space on its ability to still create that intimacy that the farmers market currently has?
Sure. One of the things we found out during this process as we went from a really pie in the sky, $18 million farmers market is people love the market and they love how it is and they love the site. So keeping, some of the existing sheds and kind of maintaining that U shape, if you will, we feel really kind of keeps the site somewhat similar. One of the things we hear is, parking needs to be better. So obviously we've taken that into account. And then I really feel like, the realignment of Bank Street is really going to help with that site from a pedestrian, bicycle, traffic flow standpoint. So I think we've tried to kind of maintain the integrity of the site, if you will, by kind of maintaining the U. I call it a U. It's not really a U, but I think that'll help. More trees, obviously, you can kind of see in the rendering that we're going to have some, areas, some bioswales and some plant plenty of trees. And I think that'll help with that as well.
Mr. Urban?
I recall right now people can park to the north of the northmost shed in kind of a just plain gravel area. And according to this, that area is going to be turned into kind of a tree and grassy space. So you're losing the parking spaces there that are very convenient for people who have disabilities or people who are have difficulty walking. So there's some trade-offs here that I wanted to just mention. I wanted to have you comment on that.
So the accessible parking as it is currently is not great. It's kind of spread out throughout the site. And we've really taken, if you look just above the A and the N in Bank Street, that's all accessible parking in that space. And then we're going to have bicycle parking kind of in that area as well. If the current site where Bank Street currently kind of veers northeast towards the railroad tracks, by straightening it, we actually gain some space. And then by taking, and that lot is much like the lot to the south, it's kind of a free-for-all depending on how people that arrive first get there and start parking. So by organizing the parking and having striped parking, we're actually going to have a net increase, and we're going to have an increase of the accessible number of parking spaces.
Other questions, rather? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Director. Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on this item, please step forward. You have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Seeing no one, Commissioners, the requested actions, a motion to accept the grant and approve the grant agreement. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Cunningham.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Anderson. Discussion? I did have one question for the director. When would this all happen?
2020. Next year.
Which would be the refurbishment of the existing sheds, building the new shed, which is the darker reddish-brown color, and then refurbishing and expanding the restroom, office, storage building that's currently there. And then the realignment of Bank Street would also be in 2020.
Some grinding of parking lots or anything like that in this?
I don't know if we'll be able to do that necessarily, but we can certainly, if we have equipment in there, we can at least make some improvements as far as eliminating some of the potholes and some of the bigger, depressions in those lots. And we do have to get a DEQ permit to do work in that area. So we'll have to be mindful of what their requirements are as well.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion carried. Mr. Manager?
Adoption of an ordinance amending Chapter 9, the Building Code, to make violations of this chapter municipal civil infractions and to modify sections regarding unsafe equipment, licensed contractors, and dangerous buildings.
A report? No? Anyone in the audience wanting to comment on this item, please step forward. You have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within the city. Seeing no one, Commissioners requested actions. A motion to adopt the ordinance. Is there a motion? Moved by Vice Mayor Knott.
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Urban. Discussion? Mr. Attorney, is this the ongoing journey of decriminalizing?
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinances where we can. Excellent. Shared prosperity at work. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Knott.
Yes.
Mayor Hopewell.
Yes. Mr. Manager, do you have a motion carried? Do you have a report this evening?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
Mr. Clerk?
No, sir.
Mr. Attorney?
Just a brief comment. Even though there was not a lot of discussion on Chapter 9, we had somebody in the audience ready and able to answer questions. I wanted to introduce to the Commission the new Deputy City Attorney, Richard Cherry, and that promotion was made in August, and he's the number 2 guy in the office now.
Congratulations. We are now at citizens' comments on anything this evening. Please step forward. You have 4 minutes. Give us your name and whether you live within our city. Good evening.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ray Sweeney. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. I wrote some comments. I don't do well under deadlines, but I will read them. But after listening to some of the discussions here, I probably would have wanted to revise them. In 2011, the City Commission of Kalamazoo decided to no longer ask a person's criminal record on job applications for city employment. Ban the box was required of contractors for city businesses contracting in 2016. The mere fact that someone had been convicted of a crime could not be the basis of excluding someone from further consideration, that is, further consideration for employment. Very soon you'll be asked to extend this sort of non-discrimination to persons who are applying to lease an apartment. And I say bravo. The lack of affordable housing is a problem in the county and elsewhere, and I'm delighted to learn of all the efforts that are being undertaken to remedy this problem, Harrison Circle being one of the latest ones, and I've just now learned about the LISP project as well on, what is that? Well, whatever. You did that earlier today. Commissioner Patrice Griffin has helped us understand how access to affordable housing can be denied. That is to say, not as a result of availability, but because of discrimination. There are a variety of ways that this happens, not just on the basis of a criminal record. It can be also for evictions, source of income, and being a member of a protected class. I've become involved with several persons who have lacked access or the income to find adequate housing. I've become acquainted with or been friends with quite a few who are recently homeless. This all in the context of sharing a meal at Sunday nights at First United Methodist Church. These relationships have fostered a concern that extends beyond the meal. The congregation is raising $1 million to assist agencies that deal with affordable housing in Kalamazoo. While it is good to do something positive, it also gives plenty of sadness and frustration. I escorted one person to HRI looking for assistance to augment her disability income to obtain housing. Staff person looked at the rules under which she had to operate and told us there was nothing she could do. All three of us were in tears. She is now renting a room in a rooming house at over 50% of her disability income. You were told last summer by one of the homeless, there isn't a day go by that we don't think about suicide. He mentioned walking in front of a bus, but one of my friends has tried overdosing, but failed in her attempt. Last winter, she was in tears. About 6 of her friends at Recovery Institute had succeeded. How can we not cry out? The ordinances you will be considered can be a catalyst for a person gaining the blessing for a place to call home. 2 weeks ago, a friend found that our Academy Street entrance door was sheltering a family with children and several others, the nighttime being punctuated by rain. How can we not cry out? Just to repeat, the ordinances you will be considering can be the catalyst for a person gaining the blessing for a place to call home. Fixing these issues will involve concerted efforts on the federal, state, and local level. That was the view of Matt Desmond, author of Evicted. It is good to be in a local where we are attempting to do our part. So, obviously, I've been gaining my experience from people that are in extreme poverty, but really, the work that you will be doing can affect people in all the income brackets that need affordable housing, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please.
I'm Jody Dozman. I live in the city of Kalamazoo. I'm homeless. So to listen to him, I can understand what he's saying because I hear people say many different things. You know, I've been put out on the streets because of a mishap at Stadium Drive Apartments. I have shown you where unwanted phone calls have made money for this class action place. That was nice. I have a list of things I've been tracking, trying to keep ideas of what happened in the past of unwanted situations. Some of my stuff is right on. The stuff I've been talking to you about is right on. Some of the stuff is maybe off a little bit. Maybe I'm not understanding something correctly, but there are corrections that need to be made. There are people that are in danger. There are people that have been in danger. There are things happening that are dangerous at Stadium Drive Apartments and left unattended. I'm not exactly sure what to do in the future of this. Yes, I am looking for a class action lawsuit. I'm looking for direction to get there, and I'm looking for some type of relief. I thank Fred Upton's office very much for helping me with my student loan. To my understanding, it's dismissed and I don't have it anymore. I have a couple other things that I need to set aside so I can make sure that I can afford housing, not be put into the streets where there's an eviction or something I can't afford. Once I get on track, then I can just play it smoothly through that. Here's some paperwork that I've taken notes of, and I need to send them off to the place that I've seen the last class action settlement go to.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Evening, Andrew Argo, Vine Neighborhood. Just two things. First of all, this is really new. I found out about this. Literally, my phone was getting blown up while I was on the bus down here. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with the sacred mound across the street over at Bronson Park, but I've got a lot of concerned messages that it was either being dug up or excavated. I went and looked at it. From a distance, that is actually what it looked like. I literally started running up to it. It looks like some grass might be being replanted there right now, but I also did see a couple of city trucks next to it. I would say if that is not the case, if the mound is not being excavated or dug up in any fashion or form, I think that it would behoove the city to put out a statement about that as soon as possible, because I'm already starting to see it percolate around social media, and it'd be good to get ahead of that and also explain specifically what is going on or being done to the mound. It is a sacred location for a lot of indigenous folks who live here and outside of the city, and we have to be very careful about how we interact with that space. The second thing I wanted to bring up, this is kind of just an open invitation on Thursday, actually right across the street, Bronson Park. We're going to be kind of hosting a de facto houseless persons forum as the Kalamazoo Socialist Party. I've sent out invitations to a lot of the folks running for a elected city office in this election, but I also specifically wanted to invite everybody who's currently serving on the board and who will be continuing to serve on the board following the election. I feel, and I think probably a lot of the other people running do too, that particularly this time last year, what the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment folks did really successfully, a lot of the issues that are, really like the big issues of this election. You're talking about housing, access to healthcare, mental health care services, just general quality of life issues for our lowest income residents. I don't think that would be at the forefront of this discussion as much as it is if it hadn't been for that activity in the park last year. But of course, again, I still keep in touch with a lot of those folks. They generally tell me, we're glad these things are being talked about, but we don't see a lot of changes actually being made. In some ways, our lives have actually gotten worse since we called attention to those issues. So that's going to be this Thursday from 2:30 to 4 p.m. I'm actually going to be out tomorrow afternoon and Thursday early on trying to get the word out about it, but I invite everybody who's part of city administration to come across the street. Basically, it's going to be kind of split up half and half between, having houseless people come up, express their issues, talk about possible solutions, and whichever candidates can make it to the event, the latter portion of it is going to be them answering questions directly from folks who show up. I think, is there anything else? And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Nehemiah Scudder. I live at 345 North Burdick in room number 303. I thought maybe some of you might be interested in the results of heavy usage of marijuana for decades. Well, I ran across two such individuals out in hippie communes in the country when I was in Oregon. And actually, my impression of these people was that they weren't worth much. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to get involved in politics to make the world better. They just wanted to kick back, smoke their joint, and let the world go by. That's apparently what happens with heavy usage of marijuana. Now, moderate usage may not be that serious. I don't know, but I'm skeptical. And actually, in the summer of 1976, when I ran across these two individuals at different times, I decided to quit using marijuana, even though many of my friends used it. I haven't used it since then, which is a long time. You take 76 and 24, it's maybe 30 or 40 years or so since I used marijuana. and I don't recommend that. However, in alcohol is completely legal, and we have something in the alcoholic community called a wet brain, where somebody has used so much alcohol that they're useless. They can't do a thing. Well, alcohol is legal and people use it in moderation many times, and it doesn't seem to do too much harm that way. So why couldn't marijuana have the same result? I'll leave that with your consideration. Actually, in my case, I even abused coffee to the point where it was dangerous. I went through a period of several years where I was drinking 20 or 30 cups a day of black caffeinated coffee, which is an extreme overdose for most purposes. But if you drink it in that quantity, it's a mild form of what they call speed on the streets. They say the average lifespan of a speed freak is about 5 years. That's not very good odds. Well, I finally quit using coffee. I went to some meetings where they said if you can't handle it, you better just stop it completely. And I did. I had 1 cup of coffee about 2 years ago when the situation seemed to call for it. But basically, I don't use coffee anymore. Probably, if you just take a cup of coffee in the morning, or 2 or 3 cups even, no real harm is done. Let me suggest that if people puff a joint or two in a circle, as is often passed around, with marijuana, no real harm is done. And likewise, alcohol in moderate doses seems to be fairly harmless. When my father knew he was getting old and started to reach the point of death, he had a 2-word advice for me over and over. He said, don't overdo. Well, if you overdo coffee, if you overdo alcohol, and if you overdo marijuana, you probably get in trouble. That's not the point. Most people don't overdo it. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing no one, Mr. Manager?
Yes, I want to address the mound. Thank you, Mr. Argo, for bringing that forward. We became aware today that contractor that's working in Bronson Park doing the historical monuments on the east side mistakenly began digging into the mound on the burial mound. Fortunately, it was discovered soon enough where they did not disturb any of the under soil. So basically the grass was scraped off, if you will. We're going to work with the contractor. It's a terrible mistake and it should have never been done, but we will make sure the contractor is aware of that, and we figure things out with them. We'll do an after-action review on that. We have informed the tribe, and we continue our commitment to work with the tribe to preserve that mountain's heritage and history. And there will be a report coming out of the LiDAR scan that was done a couple of months ago. So we will again work with the tribe on that. And you know, it's an unfortunate event, and wish it didn't happen, but we're fortunate we caught it in time.
Thank you. Commissioner Griffin?
I really just want to thank the commission and you, Mayor Hopewell, for showing the public what equity looks like in action. Because as we were having that conversation about the marijuana, it's one thing to just say you want to be equitable. It's another thing to really dig through that and look at that layer by layer. And that's the only way that we're going to actually achieve equity in this community, is by taking a look at things and really diving into things. And sometimes that will mean putting things on hold. But if it's for the greater good of the community and really, really making that action and really doing the work and really being equitable. So yeah, I was proud of that taking place today, and I just want to thank you for asking those questions and really making sure we're moving forward as a community equitably.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So next week, next Monday, the United Nations will be meeting in New York, and at the top of their agenda will be the issue of climate change. So in preparation for that, this Friday, around the whole world, there will be actions to try to put the issue of climate change in front of everybody. We know, we can see what happens with all these storms that are taking place. We can see out of the last 5 years, 4 of them have been the hottest years in history, recorded history. And we know that's just the beginning. Climate change is probably the most important issue of our time. So right here in Kalamazoo, young people from the high schools, from Western Michigan University, from Kalamazoo College, from Sunrise, which is a group of young people that are giving their lives really to working on this, will be organizing an event at Arcadia Festival site from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the afternoon this Friday. They'll have speakers, they'll have music, they'll have tables, talking about different ways to work on climate change. So everybody's invited, and everybody that can should be out there to express their concern and to commit themselves to do what they can to stop this terrible purge of climate change.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban.
Thank you, Mayor Hopewell. I just want to take this opportunity to express my anxiety about the climate. I'm starting to think of the human race as being somewhat like grasshoppers that can infest an area and just eat it all up and destroy it. And the grasshoppers didn't even know what they did, but they're gone once their food supply is gone. So the implications of what we have been not attending to, it seems to me one of the biggest crises of our civilization, really. But that's not what I want to really talk about. Something I want to bring to your attention is something that appeared in the paper a couple of days ago about the discharge of a loan that the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority of the city had made to the Arcadia Brewing Company in connection with their locating their brewery site on the east side of Kalamazoo River on East Michigan Avenue. That, of course, disappointed me. However, it's my understanding that the brewery is going to continue to operate under different management and under the ownership of the receivers, which are the banks. Unfortunately, the city is not going to be able to recover that loan. It's about, but I want to reassure the people who have been asking me about this that with the time that loan was made, it was a risky but very wise investment, because what the city was trying to do, starting maybe 15 years ago, was to develop an appealing area for redevelopment along the river on both sides. And in order for that area to be attractive, there has to be the possibility of development on both sides of the river. There's a lot of brownfield on the east side. Fortunately, Mr. Surprise, well, he had, it seems to me that the city was desperate to get the development on the east side, and Mr. Surprise was desperate to invest. We came to an agreement at that time, the city did, to get that development underway. Basically, going forward, even though the loan has been discharged, we still have that property there. It's still going to be used. We still have the overall goal of the development of both sides of the rivers is still in front of us. I've asked the city manager to provide some details, if he has any, on what the reasoning was behind what was done and what the alternatives might have been. Thank you. When he gets the chance to talk, he'll address that, I think.
You're wanting him to address that tonight?
Well, yeah, because I asked him ahead of time if he would do that. If he has anything to say, maybe he could say it now.
I think you explained a lot of it very well. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the Arcadia Brewing Company did not succeed, but as you mentioned, that money from the brownfield, not general fund, was used to turn what was a very
polluted site.
Yeah, very polluted property into what it is today. And while it was discharged, we will get some of the money back once the taxes are paid through the land sale or the property the sale. So some of that will be recouped of the $170-some thousand. So we're excited that a new developer or new property owner in business is looking to keep that as a brewery and keep it going for that east side.
Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cunningham?
In the same vein, one of the things that I had the honor today of doing was cutting a ribbon of an organization, of a business, Classy Kids, and I've had the honor to know this gentleman who owns the actual organization company for quite some time. He is someone in the community that I admire on a lot of different levels as I aspire to actually one day become my own business owner. So I appreciate his work and the work that he has done moving forward. And so we've had the opportunity, the Foundation for Excellence has had the opportunity to give out its first loan. And I will allow our mayor to talk more on it because that is definitely one of his passions when it comes to the Foundation for Excellence. But I just want to highlight how we can go about business as a commission, as administration, and where we put our investments in. Now, you know, not speaking negatively in regards to Arcadia, but those are some of the areas where it's high risk, high reward, and that not always does opportunity where we invest turn out into a positive. But when we think about how we want our economy to look as we move forward, I think one of the main things that we should look at is just how do we look at those small businesses or small business opportunities in this community, and how do we invest in it? And mind you, the Arcadia is probably still considered a small business, 50 employees or less. But I say that to say, you know, we are exploring unique opportunities. We have Mr. Dwayne Powell, one of our economic developers, who is one of the brains behind these initiatives, and we appreciate all the work that the city is doing, the opportunity that Foundation for Excellence affords us, and I look forward to a lot of the work that we're doing moving forward, but not only to this current commission, but maybe in the future commission to continue that work and make sure that we are keeping some energy towards the small business economic engine that we are creating here in our community. That being said, another thing I want to highlight, something that we voted on today, which would be item F10, adoption of a resolution granting a payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot. I want to acknowledge one of my colleagues here on the commission and the Lift Foundation and the work that they've been doing. So, you know, one of our biggest challenges in the city of Kalamazoo is how do we keep moving forward the energy that needs to be going into affordable housing. That is one of the biggest issues that our community deals with, and I know that we have another champion on our commission, Patrice Griffin, and Commissioner Anderson, who are, you know, working in their networks to ensure that we're able to provide for those who do not have a home and what that looks like. And for those who do not know, you know, you have to get really tricky. You have to really you have to really put a lot of energy, time, effort. You have to know a lot of different components in order to take advantage of creating this, because society doesn't really allow for the free market doesn't really allow for organizations to come in and make it profitable, or what's the term I'm looking for? Long story short, a lot of investors stay away from creating affordable housing because of profitability is just not there. So as a community or as organizations in this community move forward on this agenda of affordable housing, they have to be creative. They have to find ways to create that opportunity. And I think a part of that is, you know, our city commission being active in engaging different individuals in the community to, you know, make it palatable. And I just want to once again commend my partner here, David Anderson, and the work that you have been doing to champion in our community, and it is coming to fruition. Now, whether it wins or loses, one of the things I do want to highlight here also is as you move forward with this opportunity, ensuring that we create these green spaces, ensuring that we are taking care of our community and our global impact and whatever that looks like. So, you know, as much as I hold everyone else accountable, I hold my colleague accountable, and I'm honored to say that I trust the work that you're doing and moving forward. And then last but not least, I wanted to acknowledge an individual who has probably one of, if not the most impact, who has impacted my life more than anyone else in the world. And this individual is my father, and today is his birthday. So happy birthday, Dad. I didn't get an opportunity to see you yet today, and I'm gonna stop by after this meeting, but thank you for always being a supporter of me. Thank you for imparting your knowledge, your wisdom. Thank you for always being a father that has been present in my life since day one, teaching me the things that I have had the opportunity to learn. He has been dealing with health issues as of late, so for me, you know, it's kind of that transition of how does a son take care of his father, and being prepared for that component is kind of sideswiped me, but you know, I look forward to continuously living up to the standard of this man who I see as being the greatest man to ever walk earth besides Jesus Christ. So once again, thank you, Father, for being there, and happy birthday.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooney brought up the climate change rally that's happening and the issue of climate crisis. I think I want to piggyback on some of your comments, particularly around the recycle challenge and how the city could do better leveraging this challenge to attempt to change behavior here in the city of Kalamazoo, our residents and property owners, when it comes to bulk trash. This is something I've talked about repeatedly this year. September is a bulk trash month. In 2 weeks, if you drive in my neighborhood, you will see gently used furniture that could be gifted, donated to a nonprofit. There's dozens of things that could happen with this furniture just tossed on the curb, and it goes into our landfills. Back in June, I sent the city manager, when it was bulk trash month, some pictures of property owners. They owned the properties across the street. It wasn't coming out of those houses. I don't know where it was coming from. Properties maybe outside of the city. And it was wood furniture that the workers just launched from a trailer, and by the time it hit the curb line, it splintered and split. But these were desks, these were dressers, items that could have benefited from somebody that didn't have the means to purchase them. And as a city, I think with our bulk trash program, we incentivize, we make it easy for folks. Once a quarter, you can just dump it. We're now promoting on Facebook in November 2 days that you can go to some landfill and bring your furniture, your items, and, you know, free of cost, you can just throw it away. And there's far too many alternatives, you know, out there. And I know as a city we're waiting on our climate action plan. I know our hands are tied related to state law in terms of some of the more progressive policies we could be passing as it relates to plastic bags, et cetera. But one thing that we could do is make it not as easy for our residents and, again, property owners to just toss the junk on the curb lawn once a quarter. So I think that that's something on my mind, because, again, when I hear about this recycle challenge and cartoon gimmicky raccoons, I think, well, that's nice. But, again, drive through the city for the next couple of weeks and see the amount of furniture and recyclable materials that is just going to go into the landfill because we allow that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm going to ask Mr. Taylor from Classy Kids to come up and tell us a little bit about his operation as I take a moment, and after that that to comment on this amazing opportunity that's been afforded to him and afforded to so many others that we're working with. Mr. Taylor, good evening, sir.
How you doing there?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good, a little tired, but I'll manage.
Yeah, well, thanks for hanging in. I should have brought you up before we got into the meat of the meeting, but I would love for you to take a moment to tell everybody what you're doing and what's occurred, and actually tell a little bit of your story beyond your business. Now, you don't have 4 minutes, but you know, you don't have all night.
I think Don and Cooney, they done prepared me enough for Western, how to, elevator pitch, so I'm gonna go a little bit longer than that. So give a little bit background on me. My name is Dante Taylor. I've been in Kalamazoo for the past 15 years, coming from Detroit. Graduated from Cass Tech, single parent home in Detroit, low poverty area, really high in gang violence and drugs. So me coming 2 hours away changed my whole perspective on life. So I came up here and got around just a lot of positive individuals on Western Michigan campus. There was a lot of positive programs. So with that being said, I stayed up here, stuck it out, ended up getting my bachelor's in business management, minor in accounting. That's when I pursued Classy Kids in 2013. So I had a vision from there to just give Kalamazoo something unique, something different for the community and give back. So all they had around at the time was Chuck E. Cheese. So me and one of my professors there at Western, we sat down and came up with a business plan, which I knew how to write then. Well, I still know how to write. We did a business plan, broke that down, took that, and I put it into play. I took my life savings, $11,000, sold one of my cars my uncle gave me. It was a Chevelle. That hurt me dearly. So I sold that for like $10,000, so I had like 21, and I just took off. Started off with doing character costumes. From there, we grew into bouncy houses. I added on bouncy houses, water slides, giant slides. Then we did popcorn machines, snow cone machines. Then last year, I added on the mobile game bus, which is really big. Then thanks to Kalamazoo, I just added on the Princess Mobile Spa Bus, where we do pedicures and manicures, which is really big. So I'm recently in the social work program at Western Michigan University. I graduate in April to get my master's in that. So that's been another forte of mine, where I'm actually at Paramount as well, where I'm the Dean of Behavior, so I deal with behavior issues, especially with kids in low poverty income neighborhoods that we recently opened up our doors to with trauma, early childhood education. I do speech with them. I do behavior support plans. I work with the IEP stuff. So I got my hands in a lot of different areas. So with that being said, I'm just great to be, in the city of Kalamazoo, and it took my whole perspective on life to be something that nobody else offered to me. Like I didn't know, me and Bobby was talking earlier, nobody taught me about credit. I didn't know what credit was until I got here, and just, getting around a positive environment, a different group of people. I was never in trouble, never had no issues. It's just, I was never taught that. So that's pretty much, my story with me. I'm actually writing a book with Sonia Hollins. We're working on that now, where it's called Don't Become a Product of Your Environment. So we're deep into that right now. I think that's going to be a big hit and motivational for other kids or other upcoming businessmen, and or just kids coming from low-income neighborhoods and just trying to do something and have that motivation. And so I'm just that beacon for them. I'm young. I'm 31. So just beat all odds. I never did drugs. Never been drunk a high day in my life. No felonies. No misdemeanors. I probably got like 6 parking tickets, no speeding tickets. So it's odd for a young black man in America to beat all them odds. Got a bachelor, working on a master's. So I think I just been blessed throughout the life by God's grace, and continue to push forward to be all I can be for Kalamazoo and the upcoming years.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Would you come over to the microphone and just tell everybody a little bit about this program? Just take a minute and highlight what this program is.
I normally don't not do what you asked me to do, but if I can just say how proud I am of this young man.
I knew that was coming.
I had to say it. I'm just, all day I've been thinking about it. He is another amazing, I don't even know the words to say, an amazing example of what we mean when SBK, what we mean in business development fund, economic equity, racial equity, employing 22 people. It's just amazing. So I'm just so proud that he allowed us to be a part of his journey. And I just look forward to when he's making his millions and I can ask for a loan. So, but no, I'm really, truly proud of him. He's a father and newly engaged. He's just doing all the right things, and he's a great example. So we're going to figure out how to put him on a billboard. That's what we're going to do. So, yes. So he's invested a lot of money, all of his time, all of his effort. Again, working full time. I mean, I was seeing him yesterday at an event, and he's working, 12, 14-hour days. So he's working super hard. I'm just, again, glad that we were able to be a part of this journey.
The program?
To answer your question, so super excited about the Business Development Fund. We're having a lot of success, a lot of activity. The Business Development Fund, for those that do not know, the Foundation for Excellence funded, I believe, a little over $1 million for the Community Planning Economic Development Department to have funding to almost play gap funding, right? So you have private or public financing for businesses, but oftentimes for startup businesses and a large group of people, they just don't have access. They may not have the business income or the history or whatever it may be, and we've seen that as a gap, and we wanted to support that gap, and Duante is a very good example of that. Since we started in March, we've supported in different ways through grants and loans and sponsorships about 72 different businesses in all different types of ways. We spent a little over $200,000, and we've got a very strong pipeline for the rest of the year. So doing amazing work, just getting started, and just really excited to be doing this work to support our neighborhoods. Those that may not have access now have access at all different levels. So I love the work that we're doing, being busy to support those that really, truly need it most.
Really quick. And with that being said, with me being that person who didn't have that access, and I'm having that access now, it just helped me. It helped me to grow a lot. Helped me to grow much more than what I, could have been that stepping stone. Me doing it on my own for so long. So, like I said, credit was really big, and banks said, hey, no credit, we can help you. I had all these assets, but at the end of the day, thanks to this program, it took me where I can take off and say, okay, I can do this and this now. Where I added 2 things to the business, it usually be 1 a year where I try to reinvest. So great program, great opportunity. So
thank you, gentlemen. So what I wanted, why I highlighted this is, Commission, this is your work. And part of it is this opportunity, this fund not everyone knows about, and we're trying to put it out there more and more and more. This is about wealth building in our neighborhoods. This is about individuals that don't have the access. We hear people talking about, hey, we should do this with business and this with that startups and what have you. We're doing the work. We're doing the work. We may not tell our story that great, and that's part of why I'm going to continue for my 7 weeks that I have left to keep pushing this story of the great work that is happening due to the Foundation for Excellence, due to Shared Prosperity, and due to this City Commission. Your work. Your work. These funds have been targeted so much in our neighborhoods. And so if you have a business out there, wherever you are, and you have an interest, Dwayne Powell's number is 337-8026. (337-8026). 337-8026. And I want his phone ringing off the hook. But when you all get to stand and talk about this work, this is yours. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of everything we're doing in regards to trying to move the needle. And I'm also proud that we understand that we have not arrived yet, and that there's more work to do, and you still have more funds to work with folks on. Gap funding when you can't get credit because the bank won't give you the opportunity. And in this case, a man who's fluid with cash, in a way, or at least assets, but had no credit because he paid everything with cash. So it's not a bad thing. Just had no debt. And because he had no debt, that means you can't go into debt. So it's just an interesting construct. But we have more stories like this coming. I think we need to do more videos. You know, Mr. Powell and myself and Kevin Ford did a video a while back talking about what was to come. Now we need to start telling about the stories that have occurred as examples for people to use when they have great ideas and a passion and want to move their lives forward. Thank you, John. Okay, yep. Okay, yeah, you're pushing it,
I would
man.
be very remiss to not note the hard work of my manager and as well as Director Dorla Bonner and Rebecca Kick and all the support that they've given us, obviously City Manager as well. So I want to thank our management staff and all the hard work. Again, we spent an hour and a half today discussing new entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurs that we can support, as well as Antonio Mitchell. So great staff, great team is what creates dream work. So thank you for our staff.
Yeah, and as I said today when we cut the ribbon, it is the team. So, Ms. Bonner, you know how I feel. Nice job. Director Kick, as always, kicking. And then certainly our city manager. We are not a perfect place, as I've said so often, but there are things that we're continuing to work on that we don't tell our story. We're going to tell our story more and more and more, and also live up to the understanding that we have more to do. We are adjourned.
You want this?